Well, happy Father's Day, dads. Glad to have you here. I am also a father, so, just like you, I'll get this over with as fast as we can, okay? I know we're all ready to go and have a great lunch with our family. That'll be fun. Just a reminder that that next week, we're actually going to do a little bit of a celebration here. We got some awesome stories about what God is doing in the lives of a number of people here at Inland Hills Church that we're going to be sharing next week. And as part of that gathering time, we're also going to have baptism. So a couple weeks ago, we had 9 people choose to get baptized. It was a really fun day here, really exciting to see what God was doing in their lives. And a couple folks said, I'm not ready to today, but I'd like to soon. So we're going to do baptism again next week. If you would like to be baptized, you haven't made that decision yet, you'd like to figure out what it looks like to take your next step in following after Jesus, we would love for you to sign up for this. So you can go to inlandhills.com/baptism and register there, and we would be happy to send you, we'll have a staff member who gets a hold of you. So just signing up doesn't obligate you. If you've got questions or you need to have a conversation, that's totally fair. We're happy to talk through that. So that'll be next week. Is there a buzz? Is that just me? No buzz, just me? Okay, there's a buzz on the stage at least, and I just thought you guys should know about it. Okay. Either that or I am really tired, which is definitely possible. Okay, let's continue. All right, so we're in week 2 of a series that we're calling Bringin Home the Bacon. So this is really a series about money and what money does in us and through us and to us. And I realize that this might not be the favorite thing that we could talk about on a Father's Day, but I also just want to remind dads and grandfathers out there of this. Your kids and grandkids will learn a lot about money by watching you. They'll figure out how much you obsess with it or don't. They'll figure out how generous you are or not. They'll figure out how you think the world works. Is it a world of abundance or scarcity? They'll be able to just figure all that out. You won't ever even have to say a word. And so as you're thinking about raising up your kids, your grandkids, or pouring into other people in your life, just know that there's a lot that they will figure out about money and the way the world works by watching your example. Before we jump in today, I just want to remind you, for some of us, we're behind or we're in over our heads and we're not sure how to get out of the place that we're in right now. It's possible that we at Inland Hills Church can help you. So if you go to inlandhills.com, at the bottom of our homepage, and it's been up really since the pandemic started, there's just a section that says, can we help? And there's a button that says, get assistance. So if you have a bill you can't make or an obligation you can't quite make, it's possible that we'll be able to help you. You got to let us know. And we talk to people. We make sure that they are working toward getting to a better place. We can even advise financial counselors if that's something that someone needs. So we don't just give money to anybody who clicks that. That's something that it's a process we walk people through because we want financial freedom for them. We want financial health for them. But if you find yourself you're not sure where to go, I just want you to know that because of the generosity of a lot of people who are sitting in this room today, we have a fund called Share Hope that we are able to set aside a lot of dollars every year in order to help with needs in our community. So if that's you and even talking about money today is just going to stress you out because you feel like you're in so over your head right now, I just want you to know that we may be able to help and that our church wants financial freedom for you. So let us know. Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. And we're happy to have a conversation and see if we're able to help you. Fair enough? Is it good? Okay, let's move on. This is my father, and this is my son, Jack. I want to tell you about a time that when I was a little older than Jack, my father scared me. It was the most frightened I'd ever been up till that point of my life, okay? So that's my dad, that's my son Jack. And on this day, my dad, who, by the way, my dad's name is David, and we were talking before my kids were born, what are the grandkids going to call my mom and dad, right? And so my mom decided to go with the word Nani. The kids could call her Nani, which, calling her mom for years, I got to tell you, the switch in my own mind to call her Nani in front of my kids now, still every day. I'm like, it's Nani, right? We're going with Nani. Yes. My dad wanted to be called Super Dave. So that's what my kids call my dad, is Super Dave. When they were real small, I really liked it because they were still working on their language, and several times they called him Stupid Dave, which I thought was amazing. But so this is my son Jack. This is Super Dave. And on this day, we also showed Jack how to position the camera so that the fish looks bigger, right? We want to make sure that everybody knows You got a really big catch. You just gotta place it right is all. So when I was turned 13, my dad, David, decided that we should have a big get together at my house because 13 was a big birthday. So we invited all of my middle school guy friends, my best guy friends, had about 10, 12 guys come over and hang out. And we lived in East Texas. And so East Texas is a lot of rolling hills, a lot of trees. Trees, by the way, if you've only lived in Southern California your whole life, that's what happens when you get rainfall and small things like grow and get, so look it up. It's good. Wikipedia's great. So we had lots of trees, lots of plants, lots of rolling hills, and we lived out in a very rural area. And so there were all these blacktop roads that were out in the middle of nowhere. You could be out there for hours and not another car would pass. These big trees that hang over the road. It just gave it that real creepy vibe. So that's the area that we lived in. And my dad thought, let's do a hayride. Let's have some friends over and we'll hook a trailer up to the back of his pickup truck and we'll put a bunch of bales of hay in the back and we'll all sit back there and hold a flashlight up to our face and tell ghost stories and do all that. And that'll be really fun. So it's great. That'll be fun. So we invited the friends over. We had a campfire in the backyard first. Again, a fire is a thing that you can have if it rains sometimes. You can just gather around it and enjoy yourself. So we did that. And then my dad said, well, hey, it's time to go on the hayride. I'm going to go inside. I got to grab something real fast. So he goes inside the house. He comes back out and he says, boys, we're going to leave. Your mom was listening to the radio while she was cleaning up after dinner just now. And I just want to let you know what I heard. Probably not a big deal. I just didn't want you to be surprised. So I just thought you should know. There's a bulletin right now that just went out over the radio. 13 years ago to this day, a man escaped from a mental institution in Terrell, Texas, and we all knew about the mental institution. And he went on a killing spree with an axe, killed a bunch of people. He said, and they're saying he just escaped tonight as well. But Terrell's like 40 miles from here. It's pretty far. Like, probably won't see anything. But just in case, I'm going to bring this little air pellet gun that I have, just like, because we could probably stop him in his tracks if we just caused him a little bit of pain. So he shot it into the woods a few times so we could hear it. I mean, the kind of sound that just makes you feel protected, just. So, if anything happens, I've got this with us, great. So we all load into the back of the trailer. My mom and my dad load into the truck, and they drive off. And so, it's just us kids in the back. We've got the flashlights on. We're telling the ghost stories. We totally forgotten about everything that had happened at the house. We got in the very middle of nowhere. I mean, rural as it can be, blacktop roads, trees hanging over, pitch black. The moon wasn't out that night. It was just a crazy night. And then he stops the truck, and he gets out. He says, boys, I need you to be very quiet. Probably nothing, but I think I saw something over there. Don't worry, I've brought protection. So he starts to move over toward the tree line. And I mean, it is absolute pitch black. All we can see, like the tail lights of the back of the trailer are kind of illuminating the sides of the road just a little bit in red. That's about it. We can't see past the side of the road. So we all lean forward, because if you peer into the pitch blackness, you can see better. And so he walks into the woods, totally disappears, and we're trying to stop and listen. Can we hear anything? Trees, like feet crunching branches, leaves, anything? But it is totally quiet. And then in the stillness of that moment, bang! A huge gunshot goes off. Like, we were not expecting it at all. This was not, right? This was a gunshot. My dad runs back to the trailer where we're all sitting. He's got blood running down his head, and he goes, go, save yourselves. And my mom takes off. She goes like 100 yards down the road. I'm just a basket case in the back like, oh, what happened? My dad's dead. We're all going to die. I'm just freaking out. And then she stops the truck in the middle of the road, and my dad comes walking up, laughing his head off. That's how I grew up, y'all. So if you ever think like, what, that guy seems a little off. What's going on? That's my dad, okay? You just need to know that that's it. But I had never been scared. I'd never been that scared up until that point in my life. And here's the thing, like fear, right? It's just triggered by the perception of danger. Real or imagined, it's the perception of danger, the perception of harm. It could be all kinds of harm. It could be physical harm. It could be emotional harm. It could be psychological harm. And I had a number of things rolling for me in this particular instance, right? I thought my dad was dead, so there's some psychological abuse, like, call the CPA on that, like the Child Protective Agency on that. And then also I had physical fear, right? I thought that, well, he got my dad first and now he's coming for me. This fear is triggered by the perception of danger. And when I was that age, the perception of danger for me was almost always physical. Like I was in harm's way, like physically in harm's way, right? I got older and I learned that there are fears besides just the horrible things your dad pretends that happen and horror movies, right? It's not always just a physically based fear. Sometimes there's other fears that we encounter in our lives. I remember being in my mid-20s, and my wife and I had been struggling with finances. We'd made a lot of bad decisions earlier on in our marriage about how we used money. We were in credit card debt. We had student loan debt. We were still in school. We weren't making much money. And I remember some people from our church sat us down and talked to us about kind of our long-term plan for that. And they talked to us about this crazy concept called a budget. And that's where you take your finances and you actually say, like, okay, what can we afford to spend on all kinds of things? And this is where I got scared. I sat down and I added up all of our obligations, right? How much is our rent? How much how much are we paying in gas to get to our jobs, to get to school? How much are we paying on student loans? How much are we paying on credit cards? And I knew that we kept, gradually and slowly, but gradually increasing our credit card, how much we owed on our credit cards. And then I realized, here's the problem. It's not that we're just spending more than we're making. It's that we are obligated to spend more than we are making. If I took our rent, our credit card, our student loan, all this stuff, like we literally had more bills that we were obligated to on a monthly basis than we had revenue coming in. This is what some people call a problem. And I remember sitting there, like having the first time, young adult, the first time I really sat down and like added all the, like created a spreadsheet and looking at it and thinking like, I don't know how to solve this. I remember feeling afraid. I remember feeling like this is overwhelming. And perhaps this was it wasn't a boogeyman like what I had thought of being afraid of when I was younger, but it felt like it. But in this case, it was like a boogeyman of my own creation. Like no one had foisted all those bills upon me. Like those are decisions that we had made. Those are, that's the level of rent that we had decided. Those are the credit card bills that were from previous debts that we needed to pay off. Like those were our choices. But I remember like feeling like, okay, it's nobody else's fault. But oh my gosh, how do we get out of here? And I just remember feeling fear. And so maybe the topic of money and finances is something that triggers you in all kinds of ways. Maybe over the years, it's been something that makes you feel like dread or existential doom or tension. Or maybe you are great with money and finances and you have investments and you have years of budgeting and figuring out the flow of your life. You got retirement saved up and you're super generous. I don't know. Maybe you're somewhere in between those two very extreme places. But we need to talk about money because Jesus talked about money so much. And so regardless of how it is that it makes you feel, we're going to walk into today and just talk about two concepts in the 25 minutes or so that we have left. Here's the first one. It's your money. That's the first concept. Here's the second one. It's not your money, all right? So we're going to just explore both of these for the next 25 minutes or so, and then we'll be done. First of all, it's your money. It's yours, the money that you have. It's your money. You can do with it what you please. It is the money that you have. It's your money. Jesus tells a story in Luke chapter 15. It's a very famous story. And even if you don't go to church, haven't really read much of the Bible, you've probably heard a version of this story somewhere. It's the story of the prodigal son, or sometimes it could be called the story of the gracious and forgiving father, or it could be called the story of the resentful older brother. There's different ways that we could title this story because it's really not just about one thing. But here's how the story goes if you're not familiar with it. There's a father who has two sons, an older son and a younger son. That's how that usually works. And so the younger son comes to the father one day and says, "Dad, I'd really like to have my inheritance now." And what you need to know about the first century is that you just didn't do that. Getting a father's inheritance only took place after his death, and it involved a complicated process of selling off his property and his assets in order to divide it. And the division usually went that 2/3 or so of the money went to the older son, and then 1/3 would go to the younger son. The older son would usually get a double portion of whatever inheritance the rest of the children received. As the older son in my family, I think that was a fantastic plan, and I'm very sad that we've abandoned it. So the younger son is looking for basically about 1/3, a payout that would equal 1/3 of his father's estate. And because that wasn't done, that wasn't ever paid out before the father died, what the younger son is essentially messaging to the father is that you are only as valuable to me as the worth of your estate. I'd rather you be dead, and I'd like my money now. As you can imagine, this would not endear himself to his father or to his brother. Or essentially, he's saying, like, I just want my payout. I want to be done with this family, and I want to go. This was never done, and yet in this story that Jesus tells, the father chooses to honor the son's request. He gives him his inheritance, and the son leaves his father and his brother and goes to a different, far away, far off country and land and begins to live lavishly and spend the money like crazy. He finally gets to a place where he spends everything that he's got. It's all gone. And he's spent it in ways that would be really dishonoring to his father and really disappointing to anyone in his family, but it is gone. So he has to figure out, how is it that I'm going to continue to provide myself? And so in Jesus telling you this story, this young man ends up going and slopping food for pigs. So I grew up in East Texas, and we knew a number of people who used to have farms and pigs. And sometimes I've even helped out on some farms occasionally. But like pig slop is about the grossest thing you can imagine. It's just whatever nothing else on the farm will eat, the pig will eat it, and he'll be happy to eat it. So take this to the pig. So they would just fill up buckets with anything you can imagine that would be even slightly edible. And the stink of it, you get close, and it's just, just like for a human. Pigs eat it up, but for a human, it'll turn your stomach. And here we have a first century Jewish boy who, for him, pigs are unclean animals. He's not really supposed to have anything to do with them. And yet he's so hungry and so in need of money that he's willing to work for this farmer, bringing the farmer's pigs this slop, this disgusting, gross slop. And Jesus telling the story is that this young man is so hungry, his stomach is growling so much that he decides to fill his belly with the food that the pigs are eating. At some point, this young man decides, it would be better for me to leave this and go back and just offer to work for my father as one of his hired servants than to stay here. Like, my father's hired servants have a way better life and way better food than this. Here's the challenge, though. To go back to his father, he has to admit that he did something wrong. You ever been having one of those arguments with somebody, and right in the middle of the argument, you realize, I'm wrong. So what do? Do you apologize, back up? Nope, you double down and you try to find a way to win the argument anyway, right? Because this is not a time for logic, this is a time for winning. Do the best that you can. This young man realizes, I'm wrong. Can I admit that? Well, even going back and being hired as a servant of my father would be a far better faith than what I'm looking at right now. So he decides to go back. And he has this speech even in mind that he's going to give to his father, this thing that I imagine as he's walking back to his father, he would say over and over to himself, right? Because what you have to know is he's abandoned the family. He's told his father, I'd be better off if you were dead. Just give me the money that you're worth. That's it. He's going home. He's going to think okay, my dad is going to be so mad at me. He's not going to be able to believe that I actually had the audacity to show my face again. Whenever he sees me, he's going to immediately probably start yelling at me or cursing me or telling me to get away. I've got to say something that gets his attention and changes the narrative right away. So the script he goes through in his mind is Father, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against God. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please just take me back as one of your hired servants. Surely that'll allow him to consider the possibility that maybe he could just hire me on. And I just imagine him walking the road and thinking about it over and over again. Father, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against God. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. I need to be back in hired back as one of your servants. Please do that just over and over and over again. And what he's expecting is the father to cold shoulder him. And instead, the way that Jesus tells it is that the father sees him. We assume from a distance. And the father runs to him. Now, dignified, middle-aged men didn't run in the first century. They were wearing robes. And in order to run, you'd have to lift your robe up so that you could run. You're revealing your knees. You'd have to show a little leg to run in the first century. Dignified, middle-aged men didn't do that. And yet in this story, as soon as the father sees the son, and we can only imagine that every day he must have been sitting outside looking down the road, hoping that just some point over the horizon would come the son that once he saw go away will come home. So he runs to the son, lifts up his robe, runs after him. His son probably sees him coming from a distance. May think he's coming to punch him in the face or just yell at him or something. Why would he be running? So he's probably practicing, Father, I've sinned against you, I've sinned against God, no longer worthy to be called your son, please hire me back as your servant. Sin against you, sin against God, no longer worthy to be called your son, please hire me back as your servant. And the father runs to him and hugs him and starts to kiss him. And then he starts to call the servants. Like, just imagine the son is trying to start the speech, right? Dad, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against God. No longer worthy to be called your son. Please hire me back as one of your servants. And instead, his dad just keeps kissing him and just yelling, servants, get the robe, get the ring, get him a bath, like 14 baths. We're going to need a lot of baths here, okay? He smells terrible. Like, get all the things. Kill the fattened cow because tonight we celebrate. It's the story of the prodigal son, but it's the story of the forgiving father. You wouldn't typically kill a fattened calf, by the way, for a family. You kill a lamb for that. That's about the right size for a family. A fattened calf would feed about 100 people. This is not just a celebration for the family and the servants. This is a celebration that's large enough that they are inviting the entire village to. Something about this son's departure fractured the family and the village to such a degree that now that he's back, everyone's invited to the celebration. Now, the younger brother had an older brother. The older brother is not there for the moment of reunion. Instead, the older brother is doing what the older brother has been doing this whole time. The older brother is dutifully working the fields for his father. Can we, for a moment, just put ourselves in the place of the older brother? Because when we see his reaction to the younger brother returning, it's easy to judge him quickly, but just imagine what it feels like for him. Imagine you had a sibling. And let's say you had a father who you really revered. He was a good father for you. And your sibling told your father that he wished he were dead and took a third of the money that your father is worth and left and went and squandered it somewhere else. And what you did was you decided, I'm going to double down. I'm going to help out as much as possible. I'm going to make sure that my dad is okay emotionally. I'm going to stay. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to approach anything telling him I wish he were dead. I'm going to help him work the fields. I'm going to help him manage the servants. I'm going to do everything that I possibly can in order to help my father out because my younger brother has abandoned us. And if ever there was a time for me to lean in, it is now. And Jesus telling the story, the older brother's not there for the moment of reunion. The older brother hears sounds of music and celebrating because the younger brother has returned. So imagine you're out in the field dutifully working away. Your younger brother has abandoned you and basically told your father that he wishes he were dead. You come in to see what the celebrating is about, and you hear music, right? It's 2022, so you probably hear house music, right? You peer in the window and like your dad is in there and he's like old man dancing, just like, you're like, what is going on? My dad doesn't dance. It's hard to call that dancing, but he doesn't even do that. What is going on? And then you see that the thing he's so excited about is that this younger brother, this betrayer of your family has returned. And now everyone in the neighborhood is invited to a block party and we're all celebrating and eating the finest food. What is fair about that? So he's upset. His father comes to him, tells him, like, hey, we're having a celebration because we thought your brother was dead, but he's alive. But he answered his father, look, all these years, I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Interesting, by the way, goats don't have a lot of meat on them. And he's like, you haven't even given me the bare minimum, is the narrative he's telling himself. I think we should call the narrative he's telling himself into question, right? I never disobeyed you. I have children. I don't believe him. You wouldn't even give me a goat? Is that the limit of your imagination, that your dad wouldn't give you a goat? He's the wealthiest man in the village. He owns all this, and you're upset about a goat? But when this son of yours, right? Not my brother, your son. When this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? He doesn't say it out loud, but he doesn't have to. It's not fair. What is fair about this? I've been here the whole time. Do we feel that? His father replies, my son. The father said, you are always with me. And everything I have is yours. Side note, if you haven't figured out, the father is the God character in this story. And Jesus could have put any number of sentences into the mouth of the God character in this story, and what he chooses to have him say is, you are always with me, as if that is a reward in and of itself. One of the blessings that you've had, son, is that you've been here the whole time, not out of duty, but because you've chosen the better path. You're always with me. And everything I have is yours. He goes on, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And how does the story end? Well, obviously the older brother's like, oh, Dad, you're right. I've been such a jerk. And the dad's like, oh, don't worry about it. Come over here. Nuggy, 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 you know. And they all go inside because it's a Christian movie and it always ends happily and everybody gets saved at the end. Okay. That's not actually how it ends. This is the end. Well, how does the older brother react? We don't know. Well, does the younger brother stay on the right path? We don't know. Was the fattened calf cooked medium rare or medium well? We don't know. It ends here. You've been watching a movie and your bladder starts to tell you that the movie should be winding down, right? It's like, pretty sure we're getting toward the end here. That large Coke was a bad decision, and I'm going to need to go soon. And then you're like in the middle of a scene, and it kind of has that this might be the last scene of the film to it, but then you start thinking, if this is the last scene, I am not going to be satisfied with that, okay? And then like suddenly it fades to black, and you're thinking, okay, if the credits start rolling right now, I am going to call this the worst piece of cinematic history ever to exist, okay? And then the credits start rolling, you're like, no, 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 no. You know, second assistant key grip, Casey Smith, no, no, no. Catering by Ray's Ribs, no, 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 no. It just keeps going. You're like, that can't end like that, right? There was this movie Inception that came out a few years ago, which, show of hands, who saw Inception? Yep, okay, not enough for this to work, but we're gonna do it anyway. Okay, so Inception ends on this major cliffhanger. He has this totem in his pocket, and he carries it with him because he doesn't know sometimes if he's in the real world or the dream world. And if he spins this top and it never stops spinning, he knows he's in a dream, but if it falls over, he knows he's in the real world. And at the end of the movie, sorry, you've had years to watch it, at the end of the movie, he spins the top, and just as we're about to see if it falls or not, cut to credits. You jerks, right? Like, how dare you do that to us? If this story were a cinematic event that Jesus is telling, it would end with the Father telling the Son that you are with me always and everything I have is yours. But this brother of yours, not son of mine, this brother of yours was dead and now he's alive. He was lost, but now he's found. And then it would just pan away. Second assistant key grip, Casey Smith. You're always with me. Everything I have is yours. And there's just a really important, there's so many lessons in this particular parable, but one of these is about how we think about the world. That God is a generous God, a God of abundance. And what Jesus consistently points us to when it comes to thinking about whether this is a world of abundance or a world of scarcity is that this world was created by the Father. And while it is fallen and lots of people have ideas of how to run the world in ways that are counter to the way of God, God still owns it all. You can be with me always, and everything I have is yours. So when it comes to your money, your finances, your piece of the pie, it's your money. It's your money because everything he has is yours. It's yours, which means if it's yours, you can choose how to spend it. And we don't have to judge each other or talk bad about each other behind one another's back about how someone else chose to spend their money, they're going to make different decisions than you would. Some people are like, I'm never paying anyone to do anything I can do myself. And some people are like, if I could just get someone to clean this house for me once a month, I might be able to sleep occasionally, right? We just make different value judgments depending on our background, the amount of time, like what we're gifted and talented at, our personality, all that kind of stuff. It's your money. You can do with it whatever you want to. If you want to buy 1,000 Funko Pop dolls, you can do that. It's your money, right? If you want to spend $4,000 on Disneyland Mickey ears, you can do that. It's your money. If you want to get a Sea-Doo, you can totally purchase that because it's impossible to frown on one. It's your money. And if you'd like someone to help you write it, my email address is josh@inlandhillschurch.com. It's your money. And some of us need to know, right, that like all the things that we've worked so hard at in life, we've worked to acquire skills and wisdom and capacities so that we can do a really hard and complicated job. Some of you have worked for years and years and years to learn markets or to learn marketing or to learn product placement or to learn education or to learn all kinds of things. You've worked hard. You now earn, based on the skills that you've acquired, a very particular set of skills over a number of years that you are now putting into practice, and you need to hear that, yes, it's your money. Also, it's not your money. There are these passages in some of the ancient literature that we find in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, we read this. You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today. You're with me always, and everything I have is yours. Also remember that it's the Lord your God who gives you the ability to produce wealth in the first place. It belongs to you. Also, all of it's on loan from him. It's your money. Do with it what you will. Also, it's not your money, because everything belongs to the one who created it. 1 Chronicles 29:6, they're going to build a temple, and King David is inviting the families of Israel to come and to give offerings toward the building of God's temple. He's not going to build it himself, but they're preparing for its building. In 1 Chronicles 29:6, we read this, then the leaders of families, the officers of the tribes of Israel, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, and the officials in charge of the king's work gave willingly. They weren't coerced. They didn't have their arm twisted. They just gave. They realized that there's a portion of this that we just need to trust God with. We need to give it back to him. And then David, a few verses later, says this, King David, but who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? He's not taken aback by their ability to acquire more. He's taken aback by their ability to give so much away. Who are we to be able to do this? Everything comes from you, Lord, and we have given you only what comes from your hand. It's your money. Also, it's not your money. So in ancient Israel, these people who were invited in to live a life that was pursuing God were also invited to give a portion of their money back to God in recognition that it's all on loan anyway. And so without getting into a whole bunch of passages about this, I'll just a quick overview of tithing in ancient Israel. First of all, they gave the Levite tithe, and then they gave the festival tithe, and they also gave the tithe for the poor. This happened every third year. And so most scholars estimate that the Israelites gave somewhere between 10% and 23% of their income away to the work of God in the world. They seem to have this view of the world that said, yes, it is your money, but also it's not your money. And so you need to grab hold of money because it's yours, right? You should account for it. You should be shrewd. You should make good decisions with it. You should know what's in and what's out. You should try to not be in debt to other people. Like, you should work that, like, grab hold of it, take a responsibility for it because it's yours, but also let go of money because it's not. Grab hold of it because it's yours, let go because it's not. And the freedom then is found not in the grabbing hold, but in the letting go. Jesus, I think, holds these two together really well in tension in Matthew chapter 6, where he says this, don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal, right? There's a way you can store up treasure here, and there's stuff that you can buy here. And it's not that Jesus was against all stuff. You know, a lot of the first followers of Jesus, the leaders in the first century church, they had these large homes where the church would actually meet in. They had stuff. It's not that material is inherently evil. Money is neutral. It's what you do with it. So he's like, there's a way to store up, though, and just spend, and acquire. It's all temporary. You just need to put it in its place. It's just temporary. Rather than storing up treasure here on earth, he says, store your treasures in heaven, where moss and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. And wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. In the scope of eternity, once we pass away and spend the rest of eternity with Jesus, like there's nothing material we can take with us to that place. But what we can take with us are people who choose to put their trust in Jesus and also spend an eternity with God. What we can invest in now that has eternal value is the kingdom of God and the things of God and the work of God in the world, because those are the things that will continue to echo all throughout eternity. So what Jesus is saying is like, don't just put your money into the temporary things. That stuff's going to burn up. That stuff's going to go away. That stuff's not going to outlast you very long. That stuff's the warranty's going to run out. And even if it doesn't, they're going to tell you at customer service that it did. Don't put your trust in that stuff. Put your trust in eternal things, which means you need to invest in those things just as you would invest in earthly things. Now, 10% of the money given away, that was called a tithe in ancient Israel. But here's the thing. You actually don't have to tithe. Why do you not have to tithe? Well, a few quick reasons, right? Here's why you don't have to tithe. Number one, you're not an ancient Israelite that I'm aware of. I don't think anyone is, so that's good. You're not an ancient Israelite, so you don't have to tithe. Number two, there's a law versus grace component, right? There are over 600 laws in the Old Testament that the Jewish people were supposed to follow after, the children of Abraham were supposed to follow after. When Jesus comes, he boils them down all to two, and he says everything, all the law, all the prophets hang on this. Love the Lord your God with all your mind, all your soul, all your strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love people. It all boils down to this. And what we were trying to get across to you, what God was trying to teach you through all of those laws, was that those principles are what he wants ruling and reigning in the world. So they had a law of how much they were supposed to give away, but there is a grace now to love God and to love people that they don't give us, right? In the New Testament, there is no explicit New Testament command to tithe. Now, I've heard a lot of sermons in my life about how we have to tithe, and the Bible tells us we have to tithe, and it is true that the Hebrew Scriptures told the Jewish people that they had to tithe. But the New Testament does not tell Christians that we have to tithe, so you don't have to tithe. And then finally, and this is just important for you to know, I don't think it's not going to make you wealthy, right? Tithing is not going to make you wealthy. Despite what the televangelist says at 2 o'clock in the morning on your TV screen, sending your first faith promise for $1,000 will not get you more money, okay? It won't. I'm not going to say like, oh, give your money to God and then suddenly you'll be a millionaire. Like that is not the way this works. As I said last week, sometimes when you give money away, you just have less of it. That's how it works. Now, do I believe that God can bless you with your generosity? Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. My wife and I trusted in the teachings of Jesus early on in our marriage, except on finances. We didn't want to give that much money away. No one we knew was giving that much money away that was our age, right? Our parents gave money away. We knew that. Our parents taught us a ton about generosity. We just didn't like the lesson when we were younger. No one we knew was giving that kind of money away. And so we just didn't trust, basically, that Jesus was right about money. We just wanted to resist it. We didn't want it to be true. We wanted to hold on to it. It took us years to learn that there is a freedom that comes in letting go that you won't get anywhere else. And there are blessings from that. There are blessings from that are not monetary. It's not like I gave some money away and now I'm driving a nicer car. It's not, no, I gave some money away and I got to see the work that God was doing in the world with it. I saw people's lives changed and transformed in part because of money that we gave to the work of God in the world. I didn't do it, but I got to be a part of it. There's a blessing and a growth in your faith that will happen if you walk into that you will not experience if you don't. So these are all the reasons you don't have to say. You do not have to. I can't stand up here with integrity and point you to any pastor in the New Testament that says, do it or you're in disobedience. That would be great. Make my job a lot easier. Because every time I talk about money, people get, they lose, they're upset, right? They're curious, well, is it just about giving to this church and propping this up? And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But no, I just think this is something that God wants for you. Your life will be different if you don't live into it. So I think you should consider it anyway, even though you don't have to. Why? Just a few quick reasons. First of all, Jesus always raises the bar. Every command we have in the Old Testament, it's not that it just went away, it's that Jesus raises the bar, right? Right. So we're told, he even has a whole section in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount, where he talks about, like, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In other words, if Bill Bumstead comes and punches me in the face, I get to punch him right back, and just as hard. And don't think I wouldn't. Oh, except then he follows it up and said, I tell you not to return evil with evil. Someone hits you on your cheek, you turn to them the other one also. Pray for your enemy. Bless those who persecute you. Jesus raises the bar. It's no longer eye for an eye. You've heard this. He talks about teaching, all kinds of teachings. He said, God said this because your hearts were hard. This is the new thing I'm telling you. Jesus always raises the bar. And if 10% is what God asked the people under the law, I think it's fair to assume that we should consider that a starting place. That we should think, well, maybe we should give more than that. Number two, the church's current approach isn't working. What's our current approach? Generally, our current approach is we're uncomfortable talking about money, so we don't. My problem with that is Jesus talked about it more than heaven and hell, and so I don't feel like I can be an actual teacher of the New Testament and not talk about it sometimes, as uncomfortable as it makes me. And so our current approach of not talking about finances at all is not working because people in our country, like specifically the United States, we just keep having the plan of spend more than we're making and get on this revolving thing and stress out and feel fear, as opposed to living within our means and being generous and giving away. It's just a totally different way to live. The culture around us will not tell you to do this. They will tell you to be consumers your whole life. They will constantly show you commercials, advertisements, Instagram messages that tell you that you would just be happier if you just had this one more product. That is what you're inundated with all day long. So we have to talk about the counter message to that, right? Like church giving today, just so you know, tithers only make up 10 to 25% of any church congregation. That's just a statistic. Church giving is down about 50% since 1990. It's not because people have become worse people over time or that they want to be less generous. It's just that we have slowly crept into a consumeristic mindset that says, like, I got to keep everything for myself, hang on to it, spend it. Here's something fascinating. On average, Christians give about 2.5% of their income to churches. That's an average. That's Christians, not, if you're new here, you're not sure what you think about Jesus, it's not really for you, this part here, right? On average, Christians give about 2.5% of their income to churches. You know how much they gave away during the Great Depression? 3.3%. We give away less money to the work of God in the world today as a percentage of our income than we did during the Great Depression when many families struggled to put food on the table. Why? Because we have a really tough time, and I am the greatest of sinners amongst us, right? We have a really tough time trusting what Jesus said about money. It's hard. It's super countercultural. It doesn't seem to make sense. So our current approach of not talking about it is not working, and really it's about trusting God. Like, it's not just about, like, giving an amount of, like, do I trust God with a portion of my finances to do good in the world with it, and that I'll still be okay? Do I trust that? And finally, it's about sowing and reaping. Like, whatever we put in the ground, that's what we get back. And so if we're continuing to trust God with a portion of our finances, I believe that allows the kingdom to grow and to expand and to reach other people. A reminder, generosity is what we want for you. It's not what we want from you. And generosity is a habit that you will have to acquire over time. If you have not historically been generous, one message is not going to flip the switch on that. I wish it would. That would be so much easier if I could just give one message on any topic and then suddenly we're all doing way better. I have preached on things that I continue to struggle with afterwards, right? Like, it's tough for all of us to develop good habits. And generosity is what I want for you, not from you, but it's a habit, and habits require repetition. They require repetition. My kids naturally, for whatever reason, wait till we get to the dinner table or until company comes over to talk about the grossest things. Okay? I don't know why they do that, they just do. And so when my wife, Emily, was growing up, she said that her mom used to help her out by talking about Miss Manners. Miss Manners says we don't burp at the table, that kind of thing. So I thought, hilariously, that I would start that with my kids. Well, they just started making fun of me immediately. Oh, does Miss Manners say that? Does she, Dad? Like, okay, all right. So then I was like, well, maybe I could make it funny and always talk about Miss Manners in like a low voice. So I was like, Miss Manners says don't say the word poop at the table, which they just thought was funnier, so they just said it more often. So I would it's been hard to build in a habit, right, of trying to behave like there are certain things we don't talk about at the table. There are certain things that, are just for our family to talk about, that, like, when guests come over, they don't need to know about how many bowel movements you've had today, okay? That's just not a thing that we need to discuss. But that's taken constant talking to you, right? And that's a child, I get it. But look, as we get older, we actually oftentimes get more ingrained in the way that we're operating, working, and moving in the world. New habits take time to form. And it's why last week we invited you into something just called the 90-day giving challenge, right? 90-day giving challenge. It's not something you have to do. You don't have to do it. But if you're looking to build this muscle, to build this habit, it's a good way for you to get started. And like I said last week, if you're skeptical, give it to another church. This is not about you giving it to Inland Hills. You know, I'm a believer in what we're doing here. I'm a believer in the gospel that we're preaching in the Jesus we're inviting people to follow. But if you don't trust us because we talked about money and like you find that dubious, like, would you try to start somewhere with someone else that you do trust? Like if you're skeptical, give it to another church. I gave a list of churches last week that you can give to. These are some local churches that, you know, are doing some great things in our community. So if you don't trust us here, like maybe give to one of these churches, work that God is doing there. But here's, you know, last week we talked about what do Emily and I do? Well, we start with 10%. Now, it took us years to get there. It's not how we started. We start with 10% to our local church. We give additionally to other nonprofits, and we keep our eyes open for other opportunities. It's not, right? It's not super complicated. That's just kind of like what we've taken years to get to. And what changed things for us is just understanding that there's a ladder of generosity. And we didn't say like, well, if we can't give 10%, we're just not going to give anything. We worked our way there, right? With an initial gift, and then we became like occasional givers. A few times a month we'd pitch something in. And then finally we got the budget out. We're consistent givers. Like what would 3%, giving 3% away look like for us? And we just worked on adding a percentage slowly at a time, and finally we were up till 10. And then for some people that have the gift of giving, they'll go beyond 10 and give even more, right? So our giving challenge was simply this. Find yourself on here, wherever you are right now. Maybe you've never given before. Maybe you're an initial, maybe an occasional, a consistent, tithing. Let's find yourself. And the giving challenge is just to challenge yourself for the next 90 days to take it up one level, to give to the work of God. And if you do that here at Inland Hills Church, you can sign up for it, the Giving Challenge on our website, inlandhills.com/give. If you give it here, if you decide at any time during that 90 days or shortly thereafter that it was a mistake and you wish you hadn't done that, we'll just give you all your money back. No questions asked. We won't pressure you, won't twist your arm. Like, just, okay, we get it. We wanted the opportunity, right, for you to try to build a habit, for you to step out in faith and see, like, if I trust God with this, what will that look like for me? That's our idea. That's our hope for you. So if you want to do that here, great. You can sign up here, and we'll give you all your money back if you decide at any point during the challenge that you don't want to be a part of it. I asked you to think about it last week, to pray about it last week. I'm going to ask you this week to sign up if you feel led to do this. Again, you don't have to, but we want that habit of generosity to be built inside of you. Last thing, I'll be quick about it. When Emily and I were in our 20s, that same time that we were just struggling with money and finances and budgeting, all that stuff, it was just a real struggle. We had figured out a way to pay our bills and to give some money away to the church. And then we got, at one point, like kind of bent out of shape with the church. I was on staff at the church, but some of the decisions that leadership was making, we weren't sure that we were in favor of. So we started withholding the money that we were giving. And we decided, instead of giving it consistently like we were, I think we're up to like 3% of our overall revenue we're giving away. Instead of doing that, we'll just look for opportunities, needs in the church or things to do, and we'll just meet those needs. We'll give the same amount away, but we're going to do it differently because we basically said we don't trust the church. A few months after making that decision, the lead pastor sat down with me. He said, hey, Josh, we were going through the donations of the staff today, and I saw that you and Emily haven't given any money to the church in several months. And so the first thing I wanted to ask is, like, are you okay? Like, are you guys having a financial hardship we don't know about? Because we'd like to be helpful if that's the case. And I said, well, money's been tight for us for a long time, but no, we haven't had a change in our financial picture. And he was like, well, why did you guys decide to stop giving to the church? And I said, well, this decision was made, and we weren't sure we thought about that, and that decision was made, and we weren't sure about that. And he was like, so you're just going to withhold giving to the work of God here? Is that the plan? Is that what I'm understanding? I was like, well, we're going to give it, as we see needs and stuff. And he's like, how much of that have you done so far? Well, we bought some power strips for the youth group. That was probably $22 or so. He said, Josh, it's a really good idea to ask yourself this question when you're a part of a community. Like, what if everyone did what I do? How would we be as a community? And I got real defensive. I thought, well, there's lots of people who go here that don't give any money to anything at all. So if everybody did what I did, we'd probably be great. We'd be doing even better than we were now. And as I'm talking, I realized, I'm wrong. But I wouldn't admit it in the moment. It took a few days for God to work on my heart on this. And I ended up coming back to him and apologizing and just telling him, like, look, we weren't thinking well about that. I just didn't, yes, I was upset about these decisions, but I think if I'm honest with myself, I was looking for an excuse to stop giving so much money away. So I don't know where you're at with money. Maybe you feel like you have a lot. Maybe you feel like you don't have enough. Maybe it's the thing that stresses you out every single day. And in the midst of it all, I just want you to realize that you can be with him always, and everything he has is yours. It's your money. And it's not your money. It's on loan from a generous, abundant God who's inviting you into a generous way of living that is not what the culture will teach you, but will do wonders for your spiritual life and for your heart. Take the challenge. Don't take the challenge, but really consider what it is that God might be saying to you about how you think about money, wealth, and generosity. God, thank you for our time here today. Thank you for this Father's Day. I realize it's a weird topic to talk about on Father's Day. I want to lift up every dad and grandfather and every man in the room who pours into the lives of others. And I just say, like, God, would you help them to recognize today that how they think about money and use money and spend money and give money away or hoard money or anything in between like that, that there are people watching them and looking at them and will learn a lot about the world through their actions. And God, would you allow all of us to remember that you're a God of generosity and abundance, that everything belongs to you and everything you have is ours. We thank you for this lesson that Jesus taught us. We pray that we would be more faithful to be the generous stewards of your wealth that you've called us to be. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.